And coming up on this week's show, is a comeback for Virgin trains on the West Coast about to be crushed? The DfT objects to a whole swarm of other open access applications. And Richard samples Transport for Wales Premier Dining. Of course he does. Welcome to Green Signals from me, Nigel Harris, and back from dining on TFW trains.
Me, Richard Bowker, although struggling with the lurgy at the moment, I'm afraid.
Oh, dear. Do you think you're going to make it through the show?
Well, I'm going to give it a go.
Right, well, let's crack on.
The show must go on, as they say.
Indeed. Break a leg and all that. And big news this week as the DfT has written formally and very clearly to the ORR, setting out its concerns, and very serious concerns to boot, about a whole series of current open access applications by a variety of operators, including both First and Virgin. The letter, a magnum opus of 9 pages in length, goes into unambiguous detail and is pretty stark reading, since it objects to all bar one of the open access applications under consideration. The letter is pretty obviously the logical application of Secretary of State Heidi Alexander's wishes as set out in her letter to the ORR of January 6, in which she set out her very clear reservations about open access. The FT ran the story of the latest DfT letter on Friday, February 7th, and included within it a comment from an industry executive who noted that ORR had previously granted licences to run open access routes, which the DfT had originally opposed. I just wonder if there's a whiff of complacency there, Richard. What do you think? Do you think there may be trouble ahead? Cue for a song?
I think there is trouble ahead. A couple of points by way of background. First, of course, this is not new news in one sense. This is an application I think Virgin made back in May last year.
Before the general election, then.
And because it was before the general election, I think that's why the DfT's formal observations and submission to the ORR has taken time. But so what they're proposing, these open access proposals, are not new. But what is new is the DfT's representations to the ORR. It's fascinating, isn't it? The open access operators have become very clever, actually, in promoting this sort of view that they don't have any impact on the public purse. Well, they clearly do, right? And we'll come on to talk about that in a bit of detail in a minute. And also, I think there is a view in the industry, actually, certainly people who commentate on it, that, well, Labour said they were supportive of open access. So what's the problem? Actually, the reality of that second point's a bit more constrained. I was just pulling out the Get Britain Moving document.
It was qualified, wasn't it, those comments?
It said for open access operators, this was in Louise Haig's executive summary, for open access operators, wherever there is a case that open access adds value and capacity to the network, they will be able to continue to compete to improve improve the offer to passengers. So, if they add value and they add capacity, so I don't constrain capacity and don't reduce value, then okay. So I think Labour's position was actually a bit more nuanced than people think. Now, as you said, there are 9 open access operator proposals here, 5 of which are actually Hull Trains and Lumo together. But it's the Virgin Train one, which we talked about when it first came to light, but we're going to focus on it now because it is just so dramatic. Now, Virgin's made an application. They made an application under Section 17. Section 17 basically means they've been unable to agree with Network Rail that all these paths exist and there's going to be no sort of negative performance impact. Doesn't mean they won't ever agree, but at the time they made the application, they certainly hadn't agreed. And I say that because it's possible that there's been work done since then. But nonetheless, it's under Section 17, and that's important. It means there wasn't an agreement.
And Network Rail wasn't exactly welcoming, were they?
Well, we don't know what Network Rail said, or I don't know what Network Rail said, but I think when you look at the scale of this, what they propose, I can't believe Network Rail were welcoming no.
I told them to back off. But why so dramatic, Richard? Surely the Virgin Trains brand, and you should know, is still strong, especially in the context of anti-West Coast hardly covering itself in glory for the last couple of years at least.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. The Virgin Trains brand is still strong. And yeah, Avanti West Coast have not covered themselves in glory at all, far from it. But I've never believed you fix a big problem by creating a bigger problem
Another one
somewhere else, right? And that's the challenge here. Okay, excuse me. So the Virgin proposal is dramatic for a number of reasons. One is the way it's structured and what the service volumes are. So they're proposing from London Euston, wait for it, Preston Rochdale via Manchester. So we'll go London to Manchester and either go Piccadilly, Bolton, Preston, or Victoria up to Rochdale. 14 daily services, 7 days a week. Liverpool Lime Street, 30 daily services, 7 days a week. It's basically an hourly service from about 7 o'clock in the morning. Birmingham New Street, 16 daily services, 7 days a week. And Glasgow Central, 8 daily services, 7 days a week. Now, they say in their Section 17 application that these train services are in direct response to strong stakeholder and passenger aspirations for quality and dependable train services on the West Coast Main Line, providing customers with a choice, improved service frequencies, and new direct connectivity. And what they don't say, of course, is, and you're not getting them at the moment from that lot, so we can do
it. It's kind of a second West Coast franchise in itself. You know, me and numbers don't get on that well, Richard.
Not especially, no.
But even my dodgy maths adds what you've just described as about 70 extra daily trains serving the thick end of a dozen important destinations on an already congested route. How can there be enough paths available?
Well, you're right. I mean, Europe's still, I think, busiest mixed traffic main line. That's a heck of a lot of trains. So are there enough paths available? Well, I personally doubt it, but that's obviously something that Network Rail would need to look at. Excuse me. There is actually a second departure, though, which slightly speaks to that point from the way that Virgin have done this. Now, normally, open access operators apply for new paths, space in the timetable.
Well, that's the whole point of it, isn't it? They provide a service in the gap that's there to a place that's not served. I thought that was what open access was about.
And that's not what they're doing here. So some of the paths are actually new, and some of them are existing paths, which they say are not being taken up by Avanti West Coast. Now, the DFT have said, we note that this application, brackets from Virgin, seeks in large part to reallocate access rights from Avanti West Coast as opposed to using spare capacity on the network. While these rights have not been fully used by Avanti West Coast since the COVID-19 pandemic, Avanti West Coast train service requirement remains as specified prior to the pandemic. The operator started implementing the step-up of Liverpool services to 2 trains per hour in June 2024 and December 2024, with a further service plan for May 2025. Therefore, we do not believe that the rights sought will be available for Virgin to use during the period specified. I don't think I've seen one where they've said we would like to take over paths which actually currently are down to somebody else, but they're just not using them.
No. Now, Avanti, as I understand it, has a lease for all the available Pendolinos. And there isn't time to build new electric trains. And I couldn't believe I was reading this right, Richard. Virgin's planning to run these 70 or so new daily services using DMUs under the wires for the full 400 miles of the West Coast. I mean, surely this is driven more by the proposed December 2025 start date than anything else. How can DMUs make sense operationally, environmentally, or economically? And as a subsidiary question, my lord, if I might put it in as a point of order, I I'm guessing these will be the formerly tilting 222s. Are they going to reinstate the tilt? Will they need to?
Well, just to be a bit of a train spotting nerd, 222s are Meridians.
Oh,
so
sorry.
those are the Midland mainline ones. So they never tilted.
I just thought I'd give you an opportunity to correct me again, Richard.
The 221s were the Super Voyagers, which did tilt.
I'm glad you spotted that deliberate mistake.
I think the cross-country sets had their tilts taken out of service, didn't they? And actually, more than that, I think the actual tilting mechanism was replaced with fixed bolsters.
Oh, was it? Okay.
I believe so. So I don't know is the honest answer. But back to there's an interesting question, because I don't know whether or not I'm sure they will have modeled sectional running times and thought, yeah, we can fit these paths within the space, the white space on the graph, even with a non-tilting train. Because I can't believe that all of them would be tilting trains, even if some of them were. But back to your point about DMUs, yeah, I mean, it's logical in a way. There's no spare electric 125-mile electric sets hanging around. And they
logical to run 400 miles under the wires with a DMU.
Well, okay, but that's a different point. That's a different point, isn't it? You've got to go with what you can get, and what you can get at the moment is not a load of new electric trains. They talk about that in their application, so that that's something they want to look at. No, but to begin with, they talk about using DMUs, and for a company that's made a big thing about, I'd almost call it like corporate environmental activism, really. It is quite an unusual thing. And they were not popular. Voyagers
still are
not popular. Those underfloor engines. It is quite a big. It's quite a big ask, I think, to say to passengers that's going to be a transformational experience compared to, say, an Avanti West Coast Pendolino or the new Hitachi Evero trains, which, of course, Avanti West Coast have got in service now.
400 miles from Euston to Glasgow on a Voyager. If it was in the US, Richard, it would be a cruel and unusual punishment. No.
Okay.
Anyway, shall we move on a bit? The DFT never fails to hang its hat on the principle of reducing the costs to taxpayers. That mantra in itself has led to some hardly brilliant approaches, not least in passenger facilities and comfort. Cheap and nasty springs to mind. How will Virgin's proposal reduce taxpayer costs? Does it?
Well, this gets right to the heart of all this, and I think this is what inspired Heidi Alexander's letter of the 6th of January, and it's definitely what's inspired this. So, for those who aren't aware, when you make an open access application, it is possible to run some tests using revenue models and all sorts of stuff. I won't go into the detail of that, but it's called, what you're trying to find is whether or not the new service, the new open access service, is not primarily abstractive. What does that mean? It means that if you put a service on, as long as the service does not abstract more money than you create with new revenue at a ratio, wait for this, of 70-30, that's okay. That will pass the not primarily abstractive test. So, for example, if Bowker and Harris started an open access operation, and we said, look, I know we're going to basically abstract 10 million a year off the existing operator, but we are going to add 3 million that's brand new, that would pass the test. Now, I've always struggled with that. I've never thought that was tough enough. So hang on a minute, how does that work then? So that, because the taxpayer is funding that 10 million one, and I think that's where the DFT now are getting really concerned. Now, the problem is that the DFT's analysis on Virgin's test says not only does it not meet the not primarily abstractive test, it fails by a significant margin. And actually, they believe it has an NPA ratio of 0.21 with a predicted abstraction, wait for this, of £110.5 million per annum. Per annum.
Oh, yeah, right? Per year. Good grief.
Yeah, so that's $1 billion over the life of 10 years.
Yeah, $2 billion over the 20 years they'd really like.
Against just 19.7 million of new revenue, right? And you kind of go, so who's making up that shortfall? And the answer is the taxpayer.
Take a wild guess.
That is why open access does not, never has, and never will have no impact on the public purse. Now, the open access operators say, yes, but by bringing in competition, new services, we can grow the entire market. And I can't remember who said it. It was a great line. A rising tide lifts all boats. And as a result, Virgin being on the West Coast or Lumo being on the East Coast means that the incumbent operator ends up in a better position, even having taken account of this abstraction, because of the benefits of competition. Very hard to prove. And the problem is, if you believe that, you only find out whether it's true or not after you've made the commitment to award the access rights. So that's a real problem. But this West Coast one, 110.5 million of abstraction for 19.7 in new revenue. That is why I think the DfT are getting so concerned.
As you mentioned earlier, Virgin claims this comes in direct response to customer demand. Come back, Virgin. I think they want a better service, given the frequently very poor service that Avanti have offered north of Preston, especially when it's often no service. What was it you said? Because of a puddle at Carstairs. Or look, is this just a cynical raid seeking to capitalise on passenger annoyance at Avanti's failings? How does this qualify as seeking to fill a gap in the market? It just doesn't, does it?
I don't think it is filling a gap in the market. No, this is a different kind of application. There's no doubt about it. But the Virgin brand is very strong. And they did run West Coast very well, particularly towards the end when the growth of the revenue was phenomenal. And there was much wailing and gnashing of teeth when they lost the franchise and so on.
Maybe they're making a point for that very reason, Richard.
Well, who knows? But this is not your standard open access. This is almost a mini West Coast franchise.
It's like a stalking horse, really, isn't it? I mean, it's real tanks on the lawn stuff, isn't it? I mean, isn't ORR going to take just one look and chuck it out? It's not going to get any serious traction, is it? Because the DfT's letter points out all the other areas where Virgin's proposals would cause real problems, not issues, but real problems, such as the Transpennine Works, capacity near Manchester, and real concerns about driver training, as Avanti's driving team, which is already heading for a bow wave of retirements in the next few years and is under pressure, would surely become ripe for poaching.
Yeah, actually, that's a really interesting point about drivers. It's a very Virgin are a disruptor. They like
always have been
big rocks in the pond and going, oh, look at that, right? And there's an element of that here. And as you say, there's lots of stuff around the east side of Manchester, the west side of Manchester. How do you get for instance, from Manchester Piccadilly through to Bolton? You go through platform 13 and 14, you run along the Castlefield corridor, you go around the Windsor curve or Ortal curve, whatever it is, and you go up to Bolton. That is not a piece of lightly used railway, right? So there's lots and lots of challenges with it. I don't think they're putting tanks on a lawn, but I think, there's an element of, well, let's see what we get. I don't know. I can't believe that this is like kite flying. That's not the style.
No.
It's professional. And they are professional. So it's fascinating to see. But as to whether the ORR is just going to chuck it out, that's an interesting question, right? I mean, the ORR's duties are still to promote competition, and that's one of their duties. Yes, they have to have regard to the Secretary of State's funds, and Heidi Alexander has been very clear. She expects that to be taken very seriously. But she also said in that 6th of January letter, I fully accept that this letter does not change the current statutory, the current legal position. It has no legal effect. I'm just telling you what I want. So you would expect the ORR to look at this and go, guys, this doesn't really work, but who knows?
By the ORR's responsibilities, I mean, we've still got an ORR which is as it was formulated for the 1990s, isn't it? And there's been various calls that it should have its role redefined for the more modern era. I mean, is this the moment when it actually happens then? Is the ORR staring down the barrel of some legislation to change its role so that the directing mind can direct? Because as we said earlier, the ORR has actually approved applications which the DFT didn't want.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we saw that happen on the East Coast, didn't we? It could be, right? It could be. And I'm sure there's smart people at the ORR thinking along those lines very much. But they still have legal duties, right? With the ORR, I've got to weigh them up. And sometimes they speak against each other, some of the duties, but they're real and they can't just be ignored. They can't act on a whim. That's the point. Because if they do, then they run the risk of a judicial review. So, yes, it could be the point at which the DFT do something. My worry is this, though, Nigel. We haven't got the railways bill yet.
No, we don't have the direct in mind.
Well, we're also told that we'll have a consultation document first, which I think is very sensible, by the way. I mean, doing a consultation document followed by the bill is the right way to do it. Okay. So we're some way off legislation, some way off it.
Okay.
I even wonder whether if I were the Secretary of State at the DFT, I'd be looking at this now and going, do you know what? This is so significant. This is so serious. I really need to put in place a piece of emergencies legislation now to constrain or change or whatever the ORR's powers and duties when it comes to passenger open access operations. I'll explain why I'm in a second. And we need to do it now. Now, the emergency or rapid legislation is not new. They did it. Labour did it just before Christmas when they put the passenger services bill through, which basically meant that all train operators in the future could be public sector, right? They did it very fast. It was a very short bill.
They did.
Maybe they could do that again. It's very important. It's passenger only, though, or they think that through, because the freight operators will be looking at any change to the ORR's duties.
Quite right, too.
And getting very nervous because they absolutely need a strong independent regulator to protect their access to the network. It's very important. But I can see with this that maybe now the DFT are going to have to act because we run the risk of the worst of both worlds. We run the risk of having public sector, publicly owned and publicly operated train companies, which I'm not a massive fan of, right? I don't think that's going to make any difference. But I was prepared to accept it because I thought, but at least we'll get track and train back together. At least we'll get some semblance of organisation. We'll have a directing mind to make optimal decisions on capacity, right? So I'll live with the publicly operated train companies. But in this world, particularly on the West Coast, imagine a world where you had a publicly owned and operated Avanti, but a directing mind that wasn't really able to do that much directing because he's got all of this open access stuff. And lest anybody forget, they come armed with their contracts, right? When it comes to discussions, I fear the worst of all worlds. So they need to make a decision. They need to be decisive and they need to be agile. That's the DFT.
Is there a risk, do you think, in all the muck and bullets of what's going on, that this could sort of slip through and sleepwalk through, and because there are tensions elsewhere?
Well, the letter of last week suggests not, but let's hope not, because I think it could be quite problematic. And that's not saying that we think everything's wonderful in the public railway. It's not, but I'm not convinced this is the way to fix it.
I can't believe the next sentence is about to come out my mouth, but we'll have a go. We'll have a go at it anyway. It sounds very like that you and me are supporting the DFT.
Well, I'm certainly cheering for them to do the right
That's
thing.
what I meant.
Mainly because they've just got to work out what they want. If they're happy if everybody's happy for this to go ahead, then I think it's probably the end of GBR as a directing mind.
Yeah. Oh,
That's the
good
point.
grief, really?
Well, what's the point, right, of having a directing
Wow.
mind that's going to make
Wow.
allocation of capacity decisions on the West Coast Main Line when 60 trains a day are in the hands of an open access operator? And that's just Virgin, by the way. On top of that, there's the Wrexham guys, and Lumo are going for stuff on the West Coast as well, right? So that's the point. I think it really changes what GBR is all about. They've got to decide and they've got to act, whatever it is.
Blimey, you heard it here first. Now, one person who'll be watching all this with considerable interest is Shamit Gaiger, the Managing Director of West Coast Partnerships Development, who is charged, amongst other things, with envisioning the future customer service proposition for HS2 services once Phase 1 is complete. Her job would undoubtedly get a lot harder if Virgin had even a fraction of those access rights granted. Now, Richard had a chance to chat with the very impressive Shamit recently, and they covered a lot of ground. The full video will be released next week on Tuesday the 18th, but for now, here's just a taster. When Richard asked her about the challenges now being faced following the cancellation of phases 2A and 2B of HS2 by Rishi Sunak.
And again, this is sort of slightly detailed thing, and maybe the answer is we don't really know yet. But one of the challenges when HS2 phase 2 was cancelled, there was quite a lot of chat at the time.
Yeah.
Well, hang on a minute, we were going to run 400-metre trains to Manchester. To be able to do that, you need a 400-metre platform. You haven't got one of those now. You're only going to be able to use 200-metre trains. That means we're going to have to reconfigure the rolling stock and all the rest. Is that sort of filling up part of your thinking as well, how to deal with the consequences of that cancellation decision? And what kind of impact has it had on the programme and on things like rolling stock?
Significant. Look,
right.
We can't escape, and it's very well documented. So let me kind of take a step back on this. So, I really am obsessed with customers and obsessed with growth. That's what my business is obsessed with. That's everything we do starts with the customer. And so when the Network North announcement or the cancellation of phase 2A and 2B came on the 4th of October, I did this, right? Because I came to transform the West Coast in terms of economic growth. That was what I thought I was doing. And so the cancellation, then I had to take a step back and say, okay, what are the complications? What are the implications? What are the consequences? And look at it from the market perspective. This I think become very obvious, right? That now we have capacity constraints, particularly in two parts of the network. One is Northwest and the other one is Manchester, which is all very well documented and we all talk about. We have then written to the department and said, this is what we think on balance, the right solutions for that. The department took it on, and we're currently working with a group called History. It's a high-speed integration group. It's got Network Rail on it, it's got high-speed 2 in it, us and the DfT, and we're coming up with very pragmatic, practical solution that will resolve the challenge we have to 2040. I'd love to share it with you, Richard, but I can't really share confidential information that we are working as an industry to come to one position to put recommendation to the department. But it is a very pragmatic solution that will take us to 2040. And they are kind of from a...
So 2040. 40.
Yeah,
got it.
And then there is a challenge, right? Because there's so much we can look at it from operation or rolling stock perspective. And rather than give you what the solutions are, I'll tell you what the constraints are, because I'm quite solution agnostic about how government decide to address the challenge of capacity. The first constraint that we have is at Euston, and we need to make sure that we have at least passive capacity at Euston to allow us to run more than 10 trains per hour, right? So we need to create that, maintain that passive capacity there. And then if you go up, Handsacre is a real challenge. So Handsacre now is a gold dust. It's become a prime location. If you talk location, it's a prime.
Everybody's heard of Handsacre.
Everybody wants to go on Handsacre Junction. It's now very crowded. So if you think about moving from a 6-lane into a 2-lane, right? And kind of this is where we're at. And so we need to protect freight because there's 75% freight growth. We want to see freight growth. It's part of the decarbonization of the economy, so it really matters. And we need to make sure that there is a right allocation of paths. And Network Rail has been really clear that at the same time, they need to maintain performance, which they're absolutely right.
Yeah.
You know, so that become quite a constraint. And we will be able to have 9 trains, high-speed trains running over that. So that is another constraint that we need to address. And so there's a lot of conversation you'll hear about bypass around Stafford Junction. So that's something that is a constraint we need to address. And then you go into...
It was a great interview, Richard. She is enormously impressive and hugely articulate, isn't she? And really passionate about customer services and what the railways is all about. Whatever Shamit drinks, we could do with giving a glassful to quite a few people around the railway.
Yeah, it's authentic. It's not sort of consultant speak. It's authentic, and I think that's what's so powerful about it. Brilliant. It is a really great interview. Now to do with me, it's all down to her, but it's a really, really good one, and I do encourage everybody to listen to that, which you'll be able to do next week.
And another good thing to start talking about the railway as a railway when it's finished, rather than a political issue and a construction project.
Exactly.
And now for some brilliant news that deserves a fanfare, but I won't give it one, that we're really excited by. On Monday, February 10th, we announced that RIA, the Rail Industries Association, had become a Green Signals programme supporter. And then on Wednesday the 12th, we further announced that Rail Business Daily had become a Green Signals media supporter. Now, we've long been admirers of RIA, the Rail Industry Association, here at Green Signals. Under Darren Kaplan's leadership as chief exec, RIA has become a strong, respected voice for advocacy in the railway sector. Rather like Green Signals, of course, Richard. So it all feels like a pretty good fit. So do you tell us all how this collaboration is going to work?
Sure. So the plan is that RIA, the Railway Industry Association, will promote Green Signals at its events and through its communications and social media channels, which are very organised, as well as hosting podcasts at its offices and events around the country. That's quite exciting.
It still.
In kind of turn, we will promote RIA and its key events in this podcast and video shows and through our website, newsletter channels, and through our social media. With Rail Business Daily, which is the magazine, the publishing arm of the Rail Industry Association, we, as in Green Signals, will be promoted by them through their excellent newsletters, their high-quality magazines. And we too, as in you and me, will be talking about what we've read in RBD. We're also going to look and see if there's any appropriate advertising that we can do together, see whether that can work. Because that, we are obviously looking for financial support for the channel on an ongoing basis. It costs a lot of money to do what we do, mainly because we set the production values so high and
Absolutely.
all the films and stuff. That's an important part of it. But a lot of this is really fundamentally about sort of promoting what each other does, which we think will be to the benefit of both and a force for good in the rail industry.
Force for good, that's right. And it is, important to say that neither RIA nor RBD will be paying any sponsorship fee. Any income we earn will be as a result of doing events or advertising together. And most importantly, Richard, Steph and myself retain complete control of Green Signal's editorial policy, both strategically and in its implementation. We will continue to be fair but challenging and not biased at all.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think this is really exciting. We found when we did the podcast with Chris Green live at the RIA conference in London last year, it took us to a new audience. We had a load of fun. RIA were great. We got on so well, and we thought, would it be fun to do a lot more of that? So now we're going to. And it's
so we're gonna. It was fun, wasn't it? I mean, there was that. Anybody who I've ever known who's ever done live TV says there's nothing like it for giving you an adrenaline. And there was during that live thing, thinking, Richard can't edit this out now. It's going out as it leaves our mouths. It's down the wires, and everybody's watching it at home. So we're really looking forward to that, and we'll keep you posted about what we got planned. Okay, sticking with a positive theme, this year is, of course, the 200th anniversary of the Stockton and Darlington Railway. Generally considered the world's first commercial railway venture, it was the world's first public railway that used steam locomotives. And a considerable head of steam, appropriately, is now building with a number of wonderful celebrations planned for the year. To find out more, Steph spoke to Emma Robertson, the Rail 200 Programme Manager at GBRTT, and Anthony Coles, Senior Curator for Rail Transport and Technology at York's National Railway Museum. Now, we didn't have the space in this week's show to include it all, so we're going to release that interview on Monday, February 17th. Keep an eye out for it on whatever channel you watch or listen. It's really good stuff. Steph had a fantastic chat with them.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. And also, Nigel, you will recall last week we talked briefly about the ticketing website.
We did.
For one of the sort of central features of all of this, which is the greatest gathering at Derby Litchurch Lane, which Alstom launched almost immediately with a new provider after they were everyone was a little bit overwhelmed by the interest.
Collapsed the site, didn't it?
Well, we understand the new sites worked very smoothly, and as of the date of us recording this, both the Friday and the Saturday are of the greatest gathering. They're now sold out.
Wow.
So no Friday, no Saturday or 3-day tickets available. But there are still around 1,500 tickets available for the Sunday. But that's all. So it's also possible by the time this is published, that'll actually have gone as well. But so if you are interested, you need to move pretty quickly.
Have you, me and Steph got ours booked?
We have. We will be going, and our plan is to be doing something green signally
good
from the greatest gathering.
Marvellous. Now, those of you who tuned in last week will remember that Richard had great fun visiting manual signal boxes in a Shrewsbury jolly with our old friend Nick Millington, MBE, Route Director for Wales and Borders at Network Rail, who is irrepressibly enthusiastic about the railway and its people. They visited 3 manual boxes, it's a hard life, including the very impressive Severn Bridge Junction box, now the world's largest manual signal box. Well, after his visit, Richard found time, of course he did, to sample the premier dining service of Transport for Wales on the train down to Newport. Here's a short film of the experience. Once again, it's a tough life for some, but great if you can stand the pace.
These days, there are precious few examples of genuine on-board restaurant dining services left on the railways, but Transport for Wales offers one of them, something I had spoken about with James Price, CEO of Transport for Wales recently. James had explained why they believed a business case does exist for such a service.
We've spent quite a lot of time focusing on it as a draw to get more people on those north-south services, because it's one of the things that does allow us to offset subsidy in other parts of the network. So food doesn't make us money, but we believe food is a draw to bring people onto the network, which does make us money to allow us to cross-subsidise elsewhere. And it's gone really well over the last 12 months. I think we've almost doubled the amount of business that we're doing through it, and we expect that to continue.
So I decided I had to give it a try. Since I was planning to be in Shrewsbury with my good friend Nick Millington looking at signal boxes, I knew I could return to Swindon via Newport. A quick look at the Transport for Wales ticket site, the 1341 would be the perfect service for a late lunch. Not only that, but the first-class single ticket was just £7.90 more than a standard. Absolute bargain. And a quick check of the very helpful website showed that the service that I was planning to catch had the dining service I was hoping to sample. All looked perfect. The premier service that runs Cardiff to Manchester is served by Class 67s pulling a short rake of former LNER Mark IV carriages. It's a curious arrangement and not without its operational challenges, but TfW have worked hard to get reliability up to the levels they need in order to run the service reliably. Anyway, time now to board the train. So I'm here on Transport for Wales' premier service, which runs between Cardiff and Manchester. It's a locomotive and coach train, so this is a former East Coast Main Line Mark IV set, and it's beautifully appointed, very comfortable. But the reason I'm here is because I want to try the dining service, which I'm told by all those who've used it is absolutely superb. So I'm going to sit back, got my cup of tea, got a menu. I'm going to have a look and see what all the really positive fuss is all about. So I'm looking here at the menu. What have we got? We've got, to start, handmade leek and potato soup. We've got Thai cod and prawn fish cakes, Welsh rarebit. Main course, gosh, I don't actually have any of that, but I think it might have to be the lamb. So this is a really neat feature. So you've got these sort of rubberized mats, which mean that it's not going to move around on the table. Good thinking that, and it presumably means that the plate is going to stay nicely fixed as well. I find myself staring out the window whilst waiting for my food to arrive, with always something interesting to see, such as Ludlow Racecourse here. A few moments later, my Welsh rarebit arrived and I got stuck in. Similar to the GWR Pullman dining service I was lucky enough to experience last year, presentation is clearly very high up the list, and the staff all went to a great deal of trouble to ensure that service and presentation was as good as the food. Shout out to Piers Croft, onboard director at Transport for Wales, and all his team. They're doing a great job. And the Welsh rarebit? Well, I've got to say, it was absolutely excellent. A little bit more window staring, and then my main course arrived. Oh, lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, that looks fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. Cheers. I'd gone for Welsh lamb rump on a bed of pom puree with creamy leeks and a rosemary jus. Presentation was excellent, and the lamb, which I'm not that keen on if it's a bit fatty, was nothing of the sort here. Very meaty, beautifully cooked. I'm also a huge fan of leeks, so the whole ensemble was perfect. It seemed rather appropriate to be eating this wonderful dish as we approached Hereford. I've always loved Hereford. My wife and I had a little place in Ross on Wye when I was at the Strategic Rail Authority. It was tiny, but we loved the people and the area. We leave Hereford to cross the border into Wales, and I ensure that my plate is appropriately cleared of any remnants of a lovely meal. Well, that was my lamb main course, and I've got to say, that is as good as I've had anywhere, and I'm not just talking about on a train. That was really, really superb. So, yeah, 10 out of 10 for that. After the main course is cleared away, I politely declined the suggestion of a dessert. They did look good though, but instead enjoy a cup of coffee. £24.95 for those two courses. Outstanding value. And it's not long before we approach Newport Station, where I must leave the train to catch a service back to Swindon. So here we are at Newport. Train's now just departing for its final section of its journey to Cardiff. That was a superb meal. It was a superb service. The staff were fantastic. The quality was excellent. The value was brilliant. So I really can't recommend TfW, Transport for Wales dining service enough. Well done. Brilliant.
So, as our Epicurean correspondent, Richard, how was it?
That's a good word,
Isn't it? Epicurean's a great word.
It is a good word. It was lovely. I mean, it was what I expected, really. I'd been led to believe. Everybody who's been on it said it's great, and it was. So, fair play to them. And as James Price said in that, right at the beginning of that piece, they don't make money out of food on the trains. What they believe they do, though, is they attract people onto the trains, a particular kind of person out of whom they do make money. So it's a loss leader in that respect. But it's excellent, and I thoroughly recommend it.
course, you used to be able to get sit-down meals in a Mark IV on the East Coast, but somebody took the dining service away, didn't they?
Yeah, I can't remember who that was. Right. I'm not even sure that's entirely true.
It was. You did. You
Oh,
did.
did I? No.
And now it's time to thank everyone who's left us a super thanks on YouTube this week. And you lovely people all are Chris Exley, Alan Kirkman, Marion Bloom, Paul Roberts, Andrew Seddon, Nigel Mapston, Norfolk and Good, said carefully, Alistair Rutledge, Bob Walsh, Mark Nielsen, and Anthony Chalice. And we really do appreciate so many of you leaving us super thanks. So thank you very much indeed from all three of us. It really does help us to put the channel together.
It absolutely does. And thanks also to our members, to whom we're also very grateful. If you've not found out about membership yet and you're a regular listener, do consider supporting us that way. You can join us on YouTube or on a system called Patreon, and we give you special access and goodies to thank you, including members mugs, which I've just had a new batch delivered, so those will be going out soon. You can see all our members. We list everybody at the end of each show, gold, silver, and bronze. If you are a gold or silver member, please do remember to drop me an email at info@greensignals.org with your postal address. We keep it secure, but it means that we can then send you your goodies that you get as part of your membership. The first bit of which, of course, is that mug. So please do that. And thank you for your support.
Yeah, thanks ever so much for all three of us. We really do appreciate it. And now it's time for this week's Railway News Roundup. And a real moment in history here, thanks to Trevor Stone for sending it to us. Wabtec has announced that it plans to close its Doncaster site, known as The Plant. The US-owned rail maintenance firm has entered into a period of consultation with the 300 staff and says that the decision has been made after a, quote, comprehensive review of the product lines and cost challenges. Apparently, they're looking at a number of options, including moving to another UK location. If the depot does close, Wabtec has said it will complete its current project and then withdraw from the vehicle maintenance market in the UK. Well, you've commented a couple of times, Richard, over the past few months that you saw a bit of a surplus in UK capacity in works, and here it is working through.
Yeah, this is slightly different though, isn't it? I mean, Wabtec's interesting. They've always focused on, I suppose, on the refurbishment and support and maintenance of existing vehicles as opposed to the production of new ones. And I've seen it commented that actually that's been a problem for them because they've slightly been left behind. But you do kind of wonder, well, who's going to be doing this stuff in the future?
And there is, of course, is the emotional thing, isn't there? That it's the Boma Flying Scotsman and Mallard and Gresley and all those things. It's somebody on Twitter drew the comparison, said this is like 1985 all over again with the big celebration then, and the BR announced the closure of Swindon. And here we are, we've got a big celebration with BR 200, and we've got the announcement of the closure of Doncaster.
Doncaster, and it is pretty much the last of the, I suppose, no cruise, isn't it? But no, it's an important milestone, right? And a sad one. Anyway, Transport for London has just released a new independent report that shows the growth and opportunities created by their investment in London's transport. Over the past 2 years, which is 22-23 and 23-24, more than 12 billion was spent by TfL, with more than 3,000 UK suppliers supporting 100,000 jobs a year and generating more than 11 billion in GVA, that's gross value add, to the UK economy. Nearly a third of TfL spending resulted in economic benefit outside of London too. That's quite interesting.
They're big numbers, aren't they?
They are very significant numbers, and none of that really sort of talks about to the benefit of the users in London for the transport itself. So they're all on top. So no, terrific.
Less good news. In the early hours of Friday, February 7th, both the main line between Liverpool and Manchester and the Chat Moss line were forced to close when a suspected drink driver crashed over a roundabout through a concrete bridge barrier and landed on the tracks in Salford. The crash caused significant damage to the railway and overhead wires, and the driver of the car, a BMW, is said to be in his 30s and was arrested on suspicion of drink driving and taken to hospital with serious but non-life-threatening or changing injuries. Rail services returned to normal on Saturday, and once again a hat tip for the engineers who doubtless turned out when they weren't expecting to put all that right in double quick time.
It was extraordinary, wasn't it? I'm not sure the fact he drove a BMW was all that relevant, but anyway, I noticed you. But did you see the pictures?
Yes.
It's unbelievable. I mean, can you imagine if they'd been trained? But anyway,
I mean, heartbeat away. Had a train been just approaching or going under at the time?
No, it was quite extraordinary. Thanks to Paul from the Independent Brigline Rail Group for sending us this one. Network Rail has apparently come under some fire for trialling the removal of train departure information from departure boards up to 4 minutes before a train is due to depart in an effort to stop last-minute dashes to platforms. Passengers have apparently reacted rather badly to this, saying that they should be given the information to allow them to decide for themselves whether they can make the train or not. The scheme is being trialled at King's Cross, and there are posters up apparently that say, "This is so everyone can board safely and keep trains running on time." I don't know what to think about this. It's a bit difficult, isn't it? Look, it's perfectly fine and good idea to keep people safe on the platforms and avoid the mad dash, but it just felt a bit controlling. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't like it at all. I mean, I understand the Euston problem, but you do not get stampedes like that at King's Cross, and I've been using that station 3, 4, 5 times a week for 30 years. And King's Cross is where it's being done, because we've already had the business of doors shutting 2 minutes before departure. Yeah. So it's the time of the departure, just leave it as it is and let people make their own decisions, and then manage the station properly with staff on the ground.
I do tend to agree. I'm worried that we're just actually getting a bit, grumpy and old, but I do on this occasion.
Well, we are. There's no question about that.
Oh, okay, right. That's true as well, is it? Okay,
you know, I can see Steph's little picture on our screen, nodding and smiling. But but it's just no, don't do it. Don't do it. Tell us what you think out there. Is this nanny state, or is it a good thing to do?
Or is this just Waldorf and Statler sort of off on one? It could well be that.
Let us. Let us know what you think.
Because ultimately, excuse me, I do apologise about this cough. I am really struggling here. Anyway, we're not far.
When I lived in Burnley, we had a neighbour, Victor Booth, who whenever he was doing this, he'd say, "Why don't you have a bloody good cough?"
Right. Okay.
Right. Thanks to John Kirkman for sending us this one. A hydrogen-powered Class 08 shunter has been unveiled at the Severn Valley Railway. Hydrogen technology specialist Vanguard Sustainable Transport Solutions has repowered the shunter, which is initially operating in electric mode using lead-acid batteries, charged from a shore supply, pending installation of an 80-kilowatt fuel cell. The project has been underway for more than 4 years to replace the diesel engine and generator. That will be replaced by a hybrid traction system designed in Birmingham that comprises hydrogen storage cylinders, a fuel cell stack, and a battery to provide additional power if it's needed. And that's on a design originated in about 1933. I think that was brilliant.
This is amazing, that, isn't it?
Yeah. I remember Ed Burkhardt saying to me in 1996, when he took over and got EWS going, said, "Those 08s don't owe us anything." And that was in 1996.
I know, it's amazing. There's one other bit of news before we finish, which is that breaking news, I believe yesterday, that the Portishead Rail Branch has been given the go-ahead, with the funding gap finally being closed.
I knew you'd be pleased.
Oh, yeah, I'm thrilled. No, I am. I mean, it's one of those lines where actually it's pretty straightforward. Where these lines become problematic is when there's no trace of the infrastructure gone. Well, that's not the case here. And actually, even if the infrastructure is there, there's so many non-compliances compared to what you need now, like loads of level crossings and what have you. I don't think that is the case here. It's pretty straightforward
But
stuff.
isn't the depressing thing? It's pretty straightforward, and we still spent more on it talking about it than we would have done actually reinstating it, I heard it said.
But hopefully it'll be services from Portishead. I think they're going to build a new station at Pill, and then run through to Bristol Temple Meads. They're planning to have them open by 2027. So, yeah, that is, I mean, we were talking about that one when I was at the Strategic Rail Authority, so there you go.
It always gives me pleasure, Richard, to see you announce a reopening, because I know you. So if you'd like to send us any snippets of news, big, small, local, regional, whatever, you can drop us an email at news@greensignals.org. We can't promise to read them all out, but if we read yours, we'll also read your name with it. So please send us whatever you like, and don't assume that we know about stuff, because we don't always. So here we go. Over to you for the highlight of the week.
Which means it's time to do the quiz. Is that what you're saying? Okay. Okay, well, look, last week's question was this, and it was a slightly esoteric one, I suspect.
I actually got this right without looking.
Did you?
I did. I knew it. I had to resist blurting it out when you asked it.
I'm glad you did. Anyway, the question was, what name was traditionally given to the permanent way gang that got a newly laid section of track up to standard, the best and the fastest? And the answer was
Prize lengths.
prize length. There you go. We had some quite creative answers, creative but wrong. But quite a few people got prize length. So we put all the correct answers in a pot, and we chose one at random, and the winner is Richard Barrow. So well done, Richard. Send us an email, please, to quiz@greensignals.org, and I will get your mug out to you. So to this week's quiz, we talked a bit about Railway to 100 this week. The Stockton and Darlington Railway, as I think you explained last week, there's a bit of a minefield, but it's generally regarded as the world's first public railway to use steam locomotives that then became the father of the network that we have today. Okay. What other railway in Britain, though, can probably lay claim to being the world's first public railway? Right.
Cool. There's going to be any number of answers to that.
Well, I think there's one that is widely regarded as the world's first public railway, right?
Okay.
And public is important.
All right.
So anyway, there you go. If you think you know, or you think you want to enter into a massively interesting debate about which one's right or wrong,
I think you'll find.
Possibly. Then do send your answers to quiz@greensignals.org by midday on Saturday, February the 15th, after which we'll put all the correct answers in a hat and select a winner at random. And remember, of course, the winner receives a very, very special, rather attractive Green Signals mug. And there's one mug for quiz winners. Only quiz winners get it, so it's very special.
Did I see you holding one a minute ago?
No, I've actually. It doesn't really work on audio, but I've actually got a members mug.
Oh right, okay.
Yeah, but
you're talking about this one then.
Yes, but you'll have to move it over to the. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Right, yeah, that is
those of you watching in black and white.
If you're on audio, you've just seen a picture of a mug.
I have a supplementary question about the prize length, if that's okay. You said it was a newly laid section of track. I'll probably be getting this wrong all these. I thought it was for a best maintained section of track in the old days of the length men.
Funnily enough, that's what I thought too, but two reference sources I found said newly laid. But I think you're right. There was a branch line. I remember going on it might have been a branch line society tour down to Forfar on a line that's gone now, I think. It was a freight line, and there was a fantastic prize length sign. You know,
cut out letters about a foot high. I was going to mention those.
Yeah, and I think that one's been preserved now.
I thought it was an annual competition that like Station Gardens in those days.
Probably just started an entire correspondence.
When there was a ganger and a length man and all the rest of it, that the civil engineer came, or the P-Way inspector once a year, and he said that gave him a prize length.
And I believe it was also applied on the waterways as well. I think
Is
prize
that right?
length. I believe so. But anyway,
Okay.
look, we'll no doubt get a lot of people telling us what the correct answer is now. But
Well, that's-
Richard, don't worry, your mug is still safe. You've still won.
Now, Richard, here's an uplifting tale to end the week on. Last week, it was the 2025 Heritage Railway Association annual awards ceremony. Our invitation must have been stuck in the post. More than 200 staff and volunteers attended the Railway 200 themed event, which I saw Paul Lewin presented in a Brunel stovepipe hat,
I saw that.
which had some notable winners. Cornwall's Severn Valley Railway were awarded Railway of the Year, and the recently completed and quite magnificent standard gauge Beachy Head, the new build Atlantic number 32424, based on the Bluebell Railway, won the Steam Locomotive Award, and quite right too. We'll stick a link to all the winners on our website, but great to see some fantastic heritage achievements being recognised there.
They looked amazing, didn't they? There's some fantastic stuff there. That Beachy Head. I'm not entirely sure what I still feel about recreations, but it does look absolutely magnificent. I'll give it that.
Yeah. A couple of points to that. The reason I like it is it gives me, because Beachy Head was the last one, Operation Atlantic in the country, which disappeared in about 1954, I think. I mean, I do love Atlantics. I think they're very elegant. And I just like the idea that they've given me an opportunity to experience, touch, smell, and actually see something that's just been a photograph otherwise. I can experience it properly. But when I was editing Steam Railway in about 1993, I remember going to Sheffield Park and interviewing Keith Sturt, who was then their engineering manager, and he showed me the boiler that they'd found, which had been the basis for the idea, and they've been doing it ever since. So 1994 to 2024, again, just yet another comment on the diligence, determination of the heritage movement to really stick it for the long haul and do a fantastic job. It is beautiful.
Yeah. Well done, them. Brilliant and well deserved.
And sadly, that's all we've got time for this week. So thanks so much for watching or listening. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up, leave a comment. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel on YouTube. And if you really want to support us, find out about membership on YouTube or Patreon, where you can help us keep this channel sustainable. This program will always be free. And most importantly, please join us again next week for Richard and me to chat about trains with you. Always good to have your company. We'll see you then. Until then, it's goodbye from me, and
it's goodbye from me.
Have a great week.